The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. Grandma Karen was dying. Her hand trembled as she reached out for help toward her grandson. But the boy never looked up. He just kept typing on his phone. Then, as Karen's hand fell back onto the bed, the boy lifted his phone, turned it toward her, and smiled for the selfie. One face was in pain, the other was smiling. Moments later, Grandma Karen was gone. This wasn't a movie. It happened in an ordinary family in China. And to understand how this tragedy unfolded, we have to go back to the woman everyone in the neighborhood knew a little too well, Karen, the original bear grandma. To Karen, her dog wasn't a pet. He was her son, her baby, her pride and joy. She said it so often that people eventually just stopped crying her. But the real issue was this: Karen never used a leash. She didn't walk a dog. She paraded him. No rules, no boundaries, no sense of responsibility. One morning, Karen's dog ran straight into a blind man at the neighborhood gate. The man staggered, lost his balance, and crashed onto the ground. People around froze in shock. But Karen didn't even blink. She didn't check on the man. She didn't apologize. All she cared about was her dog baby. To Karen, the blind man wasn't the victim, the dog was. And that wasn't the only time. Another day, by a flower bed, her dog suddenly lunged and bit a little girl's hand. The child screamed, clutching her bleeding fingers. Her mother rushed over, furious. "Why aren't you using the leash? Look at her hand." But Karen didn't even look at the girl's injury. She picked up her trembling dog instead, checked him from head to tail, and said, "Your daughter must have scared him." Bystanders finally stepped in, telling Karen she had no manners and no sense of responsibility. Karen's response: she dropped to the ground, right there in the public, and started performing. In Karen's world, anyone on her side was always right. A dog knocks down a blind man, a little girl gets beaten and cries in pain. None of that mattered. The only victim Karen ever saw was whoever belonged to her. And that same twisted logic, that same blind loyalty, would soon shift from her dog to someone she loved even more, her grandson. Inside the house, Karen's grandson ran the place. No rules, no limits, no consequences. One night at dinner, she grabbed his sister's phone. She calmly asked for it back, and he exploded. He screamed, then lifted the phone and smashed it against the floor. Karen rushed in immediately, shielding the boy as if he was the one who got hurt. The girl burst into tears, but in this family, her tears didn't matter. No one stood up for her, no one corrected the boy. It was the same pattern every time, a kind of loyalty so bland, it became harmful. A dynamic you will see in many Chinese households. The youngest son is treated like a treasury, and the daughter is expected to stay quiet, swallow her anger, and be the understanding one. But it didn't stop at phones. One afternoon, the boy slipped into her sister's room. By the time she walked in, her lipstick was everywhere, smeared across the mirror, the walls, and all over his face like he was gearing up for Halloween. Those lipsticks were things she had saved up to buy for school. She snapped. Anyone would. But Karen, she didn't look at the mess. She didn't look at the crying granddaughter. She went straight to the boy and said to the girl, "It's just a few lipsticks. Why are you making such a fuss? He's younger. You should let him." But the real danger didn't appear until the boy stepped outside the house. That's when Karen's private chaos started spilling into the public. One afternoon, Karen was waiting at a bus stop with her grandson. Next to them stood a woman who was pregnant, holding her belly, standing carefully, the way every expectant mother does. And then it happened. The boy stepped behind her, put both hands on her back, and shoved. The pregnant woman nearly went face first onto the pavement. Her husband caught her at the last second, his face turning red with anger. He spun around. "What's wrong with you?" But the boy's answer made the entire bus stop go silent. The husband snapped, ready to teach the boy a lesson. But Karen rushed forward, shielding her grandson like a bodyguard, and said, "He's just a child. Why are you yelling? Your wife is fine, isn't she? Don't be so dramatic." No apology, no fear, no sense of horror her grandson almost caused. She simply grabbed the boy's hand and walked away, as if nothing had happened. In Karen's world, everyone else is supposed to make way for her grandson, no matter how dangerous he becomes. After the bus stop incident, Karen and her grandson kept walking, and soon reached a volunteer stand. A group of volunteers were handing out free ice pops to street cleaners and sanitation workers, a small gesture to help them survive the brutal summer heat. But the moment Karen saw the word free, her eyes lit up. "Come on, grandson, take one, take more." A volunteer stepped forward and said, "Ma'am, these are for the sanitation workers." That only triggered her even more. "What's wrong with you? Sanitation workers are people, and my grandson, isn't it? Free means free. Why can't we take some?" And with that, she snatched several ice pops for herself and the boy. But Karen was old. The heat and the cold didn't mix well. Within minutes, her stomach gave out. Karen doubled over, clutching her belly, then squatted right there in the roadside bushes to relieve herself in broad daylight in public. A few minutes later, they reached the park. That's when the boy spotted a bird's nest high up in the tree. "Grandma, I want baby birds." And Karen, without a second of hesitation, said the kind of sentence that made everyone nearby freeze. "You want it? Then knock it down." The boy grabbed the longest stick he could find and slammed it upward. Then the nest dropped, hit the ground. He didn't freeze, he didn't flinch, not even a moment of guilt. Karen just smiled. "Good job, my boy, you are so strong." Parents nearby stood there in disbelief. But to Karen, this wasn't cruelty at all. This was teaching. This was how you raise a boy. They kept walking through the park when the boy spotted something new. A wasp nest hanging low from a branch. His eyes lit up again. "Grandma, I wanted to knock this one down too." Karen barely had time to see before the boy swung the stick upward. In the next second, the nest erupted. Karen dropped to her knees, screaming, her vision going wet around the edges. That's when she remembered she had emergency medicine in her bag. Her hands twisted open the bottle, inside nothing but bright, colorful candy. The real medicine dumped out days earlier by her grandson. Karen collapsed on the ground. Moments later, she was rushed to the hospital. It was the exact moment we saw in the beginning. Her grandson stood beside the bed, not worried, not panicked, just playing video games on his phone. He played until the battery died. Then he looked around, saw the outlet, and without hesitation, he pulled out the plug connected to Karen's oxygen support and replaced it with his own charger. Minutes later, Karen took her final breath. No one in the room realized what had happened until it was far too late. Because he was underage, there would be no charges, no trial, no consequences in the legal sense. But that didn't end the story. His parents would now spend the rest of their lives raising a child who killed his own grandmother. And the boy, one day he will grow up. One day he may understand what he did. Maybe this moment will haunt him, or maybe this moment will disappear like it never happened at all. There are no easy answers, no simple lessons, just the question for anyone watching. When a family creates its own storm, who should answer for the damage that follows? And maybe Karen's story isn't just about one home, because in China, more and more people say the same thing. It is not that the elderly had become bad, it is that the bad ones have simply grown old. You see it everywhere. On buses, an old man shoves his way into a seat, then screams at anyone who asks him to get up. In public bathrooms, aunties rip down whole rolls of toilet paper and stuff them into their bags because it's free, and it doesn't stay inside China. They take it abroad. In Japan, some elderly tourist snapped off cherry blossoms for selfies, ignoring every sign that says "do not touch," which locals watched in disbelief. At the Tokyo Tower, the Eiffel Tower, the Sydney Opera House, and you will sometimes see the same scene. Group of aunties blasting loud music, dancing in formation, as if the entire landmark were their personal stage. No permission, no awareness, no sense of public space. Just the same belief Karen lived by. If it benefits me, then it must be right. So now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever met an elder like this? Someone who thinks rules don't apply to them. What happened? How did you deal with it? Tell me in the comments. Hit subscribe. See you next time.